안녕 친구들. I hope you've been well. I just got done watching episode 7 and before I start on the recap of episode 7, I did want to make a comment about what I think the Hong sisters are doing that's very interesting in comparison to everything else that they've worked on since prior to The Master's Son. I'm noticing that given the format of their series where they're able to tell a certain episodic, I guess, story, they're really delving into some social issues that have been affecting Korea. So, I mean, for instance, number 1, in episode 1, we saw the story of the soccer player being blackmailed. And so that's really, touching upon the idea that sometimes a growing number of Korean celebrities are being blackmailed by, whomever. And then in the second episode, we then saw 3 girls being at first the objects of bullying and then, having it, be turned back on them. And then the third episode, remember with the high-heeled designer shoe ghost? That one we see people marrying rich people for their money. And, with a lot of young people in Korea, a lot of them tend to marry based on background and statistics and so on. Not a whole lot, but you guys know that it's prevalent enough that the Hong sisters would make a mention of it. And then of course episode 4 is then the whole vanity issue of how people are becoming so obsessed with their outward appearance that they are doing more and more plastic surgery even though they don't need to. And then 5 is just the over reliance on the supernatural to the extent that they are even, marrying their, single deceased kids, ghosts, to each other, so that they could hopefully have a happy life in the afterlife, right? And then episode 6, which really got me thinking about this whole social issue, was the idea of euthanasia in the military, especially with the military dogs, and just the whole idea of euthanasia, I'm sure, for dogs in general or, pets, but particularly in the military, because even though the dogs may be serviceable outside of the military, a lot of the military dogs, particularly I think they use German Shepherds, that, those dogs are being euthanized. And so the Hong sisters made a pointed critique of that. Well, episode 7 is no different. The episode really deals with child abuse that is ongoing not only in Korea but probably in any society that we see. So anyway, having said that, let's go ahead and get started with episode 7 video recap. We pick up from Ju Jung-won and Kong-sil back at the furniture store, and Kong-sil has fallen asleep, and we see Jung-won kind of reach over, touch her hand or hold her hand, and then look at the document to see if, in fact, he can see the words, right? And then he leans close to her, and he gets literally about this close to her face, and then he backs away, takes his hand away, and then he takes his hand and then, sharply taps her awake on the hand. And then when she wakes up, she says, "Oh, I love sleeping next to you. I had such sweet sleep." And of course, that's not something that he wants to hear in a sense because he's been affected by her presence, but he, sees that she just really sees him as this safety from ghosts, right? So then he makes a comment of saying, "You drooled all over the sofa." And he says, "I guess you're going to have to buy this furniture." And then she kind of does this with her body. And then she's like, "It's okay, I'll just wipe it off," right? And then she clutches his arms and she's like, "Let's just sleep a little bit more. It's so comfortable." And he's like, "Fine, but didn't you say you had a date?" And at that point, she jerks awake fully. And she's like, "That's right, my date." So anyway, they walk out of the furniture store and she expects him to, of course, give her a ride to the play or to the theater, and he says, "Why? No, go on your own. You and I, we're gonna keep our distance so that I don't get sucked even more into your world." And so when Secretary Kim comes, he gets into the car and Secretary Kim asks, "Aren't we taking Tae-bong-sil, Miss Tae?" And he says, "Nope, she has a date." And so he's like, "All right." And then he drives off, and then she rushes to go meet Kang-woo at the musical theater. And on the way, she runs into Iryong. And, Iryong is on her way out. And Taegongsil says, oh, did you watch this? And she's like, no, but I saw something fun instead, referring to then her conversation with Kangwoo, in which she learns that Kangwoo has actually been hired by someone, probably, his patron or, Jungwon's father, and that he has been commissioned with the task of investigating all the people around Chu Jungwon, right? And so Iryong says, oh, so that's why you are investigating Taegongsil, right? And so he implies that that was the initial intent, but now he's not investigating her for that reason. But she doesn't quite catch that, and so when she sees Taegongsil coming into the musical theater area, she wishes her a happy viewing or what have you, and then she takes off. But it's really cute because Gongsil at that point shyly thanks her. She says, Iryong-ah, thank you so much for not ignoring me but acknowledging me, because she had gone. There was such a huge gap between them now, right? And Taegongsil refers to Iryong as little son, and then Iryong likewise refers to her as big son, right? And then as Gongsil rushes to go meet up with Kangwoo, Iryong says, we'll see how long your complacency lasts, Big Taeyang. And she wonders, she realizes that Gongsil has no clue of Kangwoo's I guess mission and things like that. Well, Gongsil gets to the musical theater, and of course it's already started, and Gongsil is very apologetic, and she said, I am so sorry I'm late, but the musical just started, so we should be able to catch the rest of it. And then Kangwoo, you can tell he isn't particularly thrilled, but he makes the best of the situation, and he tells her, I didn't want to see the play. And she's like, really? And he's like, yeah, I heard it wasn't very fun. And, she kind of mutters, I heard the opposite, that it was really fun. But he says, instead, I won't ask any questions. Let's just go wherever you want to go. And she's like, really? And so they end up, and she then confesses, truthfully, I didn't really, relish the idea of staying in a dark room for 2 hours. And so they go, but what happens is, because Gongsil didn't have a particular place that she wanted to really go to, Kangwoo takes him to Hangan, which is the Han River in Korea, and which is supposed to be this very classic romantic place, right? Walks along the Han River and such. But Gongsil is like freaked out of her mind, because imagine how many people have jumped into the Han River and such, right? So she's like, let's not get close to the river, please. And then she then tells him that she almost drowned in the river, and so she doesn't really like the river very much. And so Kangwoo's like, oh, okay, well, do you want to go over there to the pier then and watch the the fountain? There's like a fountain show, I guess. And she's like, yes, please. And then as they're walking away, though, she sees this ghost runner, right? And so she freaks out, and then she's like, let's go this way. And Kangwoo's like, didn't you want to? She's like, yeah, but let's go this way. And then Kangwoo says, oh, do you want to ride the tandem bikes, or the bikes with the two seats? And she's like, yes, please. And so the next thing you see is Kangwoo and Gongsil riding, and then Gongsil keeps doing this to try to ward off the runner ghost. And so finally she can't handle it anymore, and so after their bike ride together, she asks Kangwoo to get her a drink. And it's just so painful to watch, because Kangwoo is totally in the moment, enjoying their date, and Gongsil, half of her mind is just focused on trying to act normal while trying to dislodge this ghost, right? So she gets Kangwoo to go and get her a cool drink. But the thing was, as Kangwoo was talking to her, he's like, do you want to do this? And then she's like, I hate doing that. I told you. And then Kangwoo's like, thinking that she said it to him, right? And she's like, no, it's just so hot. And so then she says, can you get me a cold drink? And Kangwoo's like, okay. And so he goes off to buy them the 2 drinks. And then once he's gone, Gongsil turns to the runner ghost, and she's like, all right, what is your request? And So after listening to the ghost request, she then grabs two random, people walking along the Han River, and she's like, "I am so sorry, but can you just hold this?" And it's literally like one of those marathon, the tape that they use so that as the runner um, comes by, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So she has the girl and then her boyfriend hold it on each end, and then she walks a little bit away, and then she gets her hand like this. She's like, "Ready, go!" And then she watches as the ghost runs, and then crosses the finish line, and then she's clapping, and then she's like, "All right, Ajashi, great job, you won first. Have a safe trip." And then the couple who's left holding the finish line, they kind of look at each other and they're like, "Oh my gosh!" And then she's like, "I am so sorry, but thank you so much." And she throws the line back into the trash because that's where she had fetched, like retrieved from. And then she's like, "Thank you." And then the couple walks away and they're like, "So that's the crazy woman in the Han River." And then the boyfriend says to his much taller girlfriend, he's like, "Honey, you shouldn't be walking alone at night, okay? Yeah, you may become someone like her and stuff." So anyway, Kongshi then runs back and she meets Kangwoo on his way back to bring her the drinks. And she says that, "Oh, Kangwoo's like, you didn't have to come this way." She's like, "No, I wanted to." And then she takes a drink and such, right? And so they end up, um, at that point, Kangwoo's like, "Let's go see the fountain show." And Kongshi's like, "Okay," because she felt so bad about the previous, time that she had said, "I don't want to go," and stuff, right? And so she goes there totally freaked out because she knows that she may see a ghost. And as she follows Kangwoo, you hear her saying, "Please, please, no water ghosts. I hate water ghosts." Well, anyway, by the time she gets home, she's looking around in her bedroom to make sure that none of the ghosts have followed her home. And in the meanwhile, we see Jungwon at his house talking things over with Secretary Kim. And Secretary Kim gives him this little I guess mood stabilizer, it's not a mood stabilizer, but something to help. It's an herbal medicine to help people who've had a big fright. And so he says, "Are you sure that this is all you need?" And he's like, "Yes, that's fine." And then Chungwon mentioned something like, "I wonder if Gongshin needs one, right? Taegongshil?" And then the secretary is like, "Oh, I'm sure she's fine. Otherwise, she would have called you." And then Chungwon looks at the silent phone and he gets this very grimace, like he just looks at it very balefully, right? Well, the secretary then implies, "Oh no, since this phone is so silent, I'm sure she and Kangwoo, security guard Kangwoo are having a really great date and such, right?" But then the secretary says something to the effect of, um, I think he made some pointed comment about how she went on a date or something like that after such a thing. But anyway, so later that night, Chungwon's trying to fall asleep and he can't. And it's so cute because the phone is right next to his bed and he looks at it, glares at it, and he's like, she doesn't even call, to see if I'm okay. And she's on this date, with Kang Satang and stuff like that, right? And one of the things that Secretary Kim had mentioned to Chungwon before he left for the night, after making sure Chungwon was okay, was to comment that the play that Kongshi had gone to see with Kangwoo was supposed to be really fun, that he had heard it was a great play. And so he's wondering if that would be an appropriate event for their VIP guests in the fall, for this fall event that they're doing, right? So Chungwon's in bed. He's trying to fall asleep. He can't fall asleep. And then next thing you know, Kongshi is trying to go to sleep, saying, "Oh, please, I hope, no one," she's on her, she's sitting on her bed, kind of, talking to the cat and stuff. And she says, she wants to call, but she remembers that he had mentioned to her, when they had exited the furniture store, that, and this is something I forgot to mention, but that Jungwon, because he was getting sucked into her world, had said to her, "Your space is between here to here. Don't touch any other part of me except this part, right? I'm only allowing you, access to this part of my arm, right?" And then at that point, she had also tried to give him a set of fans that the furniture owner had given them as a, compensation of some sorts, you know. And he looked at it. It was like a twin set thing. And so he's like, it's a set. It's a couple set. He's like, I don't want to be coupled with you. I don't want to be even linked with you, right? And so he had refused it at that point. Well, anyway, as she looks at the phone thinking, oh, should I call him or not? The phone rings and she answers it so excitedly because it's her boss. And she's like, boss, I'm so glad you called because I wanted to call, but then I you had told me not to call and that you were only going to give me limit to your forearm and all of this stuff. And then so he says, I don't want to hear it. I just want to ask. The reason why I'm calling is this musical you went to go see. Do you think it's appropriate, worthy enough for me to, include that in as one of the fall events for a VIP event that, he's having? And she says, oh, I didn't get to see the play. And then she then proceeds to tell him about how instead she got there late, so they went to the Han River, and then the runner goes, and then the fountain goes, and all of this stuff, right? So half the time she was out of her mind trying to act normal, and the other time she was like so scared out of her mind, that she had to try to ignore the ghost, and she was afraid that the ghost had followed her home and everything, right? And it's so cute because there's a split screen on they do the split screen where Kongshi on one side and then they're both on their beds, but Kongshi's on one side and Chungwon's on the other, and Chungwon's totally smiling because Kongshi did not have a good date, right? And then so they hang up, and then Kongshi looks at her cat and she holds the cat's hand, and then she says "Taegongshil zone," and it's just really cute because that she really does appreciate the conversations and the things that they talk about. It lingers beyond the immediate moments. So anyway, Kongshi goes to sleep, and unfortunately she's awakened in the middle of the night by, I think it's Sunmo, because the older neighborhood boy, because he runs down. He's like, Nuna, my brother is sick. And she runs up to where Sungjun is, and she sees that he's kind of like out of it, right? So she rushes down to the office, the building office, to see if there's any stomach medicine or things like that, upset stomach medicine. And during that time, Sungmo had told her that he was going to run down and get his mom from her work. And so honestly, for me, all up until this episode, I had wondered what kind of job this mother does to leave all of her kids alone at home so much. And thankfully it's not anything like sordid or anything like that. The mom actually works as a I think it's like a kitchen help, because she comes running in with an apron. And as she rushes upstairs, she clutches Sungjun, her second child, and, then the whole, three family hug each other. And the mom says, I'm so sorry that I ignored you while you were sick, because Sungmo had called her earlier that evening saying, Mom, can't you come home? I think Sungjun is sick, right? And so she had said, no, I can't. And so, she's clutching him, and then they, rush off to the hospital. Well, during that time, as they rush off, the three little ghosts hop out, and then as they watch the family leave, the little ghost kids say to themselves, his mom came. I guess he's not the right, kid for us, right? And as they talk, Kongshi sees them and she's like, are you guys the ones responsible for making Sungjun sick? So she chases them upstairs, and then she realizes that the ghosts are in that doll, and so she takes the doll with her the next morning. And so the next thing you see is Chu Jung-won gets to work really early, usual early morning time, and Kongshi's there with this cute little shopping bag, and inside is this doll, and she says, this doll's really scary. And you hear, you could hear Jungmo's, expression kind of, or see Jungmo's expression saying, if it's so scary, why are you bringing it here? Why are you showing it to me, right? But anyway, Kongshi tells him, she follows him into his office, and then she proceeds to try to leave it in the corner, right, of his office. And he's like, what are you doing with that doll? And she's like, oh, I'm going to leave it here because you're not scared. And then Jungwon says, I know you're not normal, but isn't the normal response after a situation like yesterday, because I almost got shot at because of you, right? Isn't the normal response to be like, boss, are you okay? Should I, I bought you some, medicine so that you can, the fright that you had, won't affect you too much and all of this stuff, right? And then Kung Shi looks at him and she's like, I didn't know that I could be concerned about you because you had said that there was a Tegongshil zone, right? And she's like, can I be concerned? And then, Jungwon gives her permission, and then she pulls out, she kind of touches his hand, and then she pulls out this medicine that she usually has after she's had a fright from a ghost. And then he asks, is this been certified? Is this, a legitimate medicine? And she's like, oh, this is what I get from the pharmacy. So anyway, she then gives it to him, and she's like, yes, we can share this medicine now, especially since you can see the ghost and we can share the fright too. And then he wants to give it back to her. He's like, I don't want to, And then he says, hey, why don't you just take the doll and give it to Kangwoo, and then you can, give Kangwoo share the medicine with Kangwoo. And so you see very much this like jealousy pop up, right? And then Kongshi says, oh, I can't give the medicine or the doll to him because he'll get scared. He doesn't like ghosts. And then so Jungwon says, I don't want the medicine. Take the medicine. Take the ghost with you, right? Well, she's sufficiently abashed. She goes to take the doll, but then it's really cute because she takes the doll, the bag with the doll, but she leaves a little medicine right by the corner where the doll had been, right? And then as she leaves, she receives from Secretary Kim an envelope that has Hiju's picture as well as the picture of the jewels. And so as Kongshi looks at it, she says, oh, Hiju was really beautiful, even more beautiful in real life. Anyway, so she goes to her office and she puts it, the manila envelope inside a desk drawer. And then the next thing you see is Jungwon crouched over the medicine saying, she took the doll, but she left the medicine. And you can tell that even though he's scowling a little bit at the fact that she left the medicine, that he's inwardly pleased. And then he opens it, takes one out, and he makes this comment about how Kangwoo is like the sweet thing, and he just seems to get the bitter stuff, right? And he opens one, takes that out, and he's like, yes, it's very bitter. So anyway, meanwhile, Kongshit in her office sees the doll, and then she tries to shake it and says, come on, little ghost, come out, come out and tell me why you were bothering Sungmo, right? Or Sungjun. And then as she's shaking the doll and talking to it, Kangwoo walks into her office and he's got, a cup of coffee for her. And he's like, are you talking to your doll? And then Kongshit's like, she doesn't know what to say, right? And then Kangwoo says, it's okay, I saw you. I've seen you before doing things like that. And Kongshit's like, what do you mean? And he says, well, I've seen you talk to trash cans, I've seen you talk to the wall, and all of this stuff, right? And so Kongshi's thinking to myself, oh my gosh, right? And she says to him, you saw all of that, huh? And then Kangwoo proceeds to tell her, it's okay, I had a friend in high school who used to talk to his pencil and all of that stuff. And then he asks her, do you know what he's doing now? And Kongshi says, I know, he's in a mental institute, isn't he? And Kangwoo's like, no, he's working for NASA. And so it's really cute because he's always trying to get her to see the positive side of things. And then Kongshi kind of chuckles. And then she looks at the coffee, and then weakly chuckling, she says, oh, coffee, why are you so black? But anyway, so she then has lunch with her sister, and she's explaining to her what's been happening. And then as they're talking, Lee Han-ju, the chatty security guy, he pops out from behind her and scares her, going, whoo, right? And then so Kongshi, she had this lunch Tupperware kind of like plastic container lid. It goes flying in the air, and she takes off running for the stairs, right? And then so Kongshi's sister is is chewing Han-ju out, saying, I told you not to scare my sister like a ghost, don't appear before her as if you're a ghost, right? And then he starts to kind of have this trickle, nosebleed. And then Kongshi's sister's like, and she grabs a napkin, and then she wipes it off, right? And he's like, was that a bloody nose? Did she give me a bloody nose? He's like, this is violence upon my person. And she's like, no, it's not. It's a runny nose, not a bloody nose. And then it happens again. And then she's like, it's a runny nose, blow. And he's like, no, I distinctly felt it's a bloody nose. And she's like, no, it's a runny nose, right? And then you see her crumpling up the napkin so that he can't see the blood and such, right? Well, anyway, Kongshil is back in our office, and we learn that Secretary Kim is sick. He's been sniffling or what have you, and so Jungwon finally tells him, go home, go to the hospital, get some rest. And so the secretary says, okay, I'll bring a substitute. And yes, you all guessed it, the substitute is Kongshil. Okay, and I thought it was really cute because Kongshil, we know, is very competent as a secretary or just academically, intellectually, right? And so she tells Jungwon that she used to work as a secretary, but that she got fired because she kept seeing this ghost with an axe right on it, its forehead, right? And then so Jungwon thinks, that she was a secretary for like a crime lord. And she says, oh no, I wasn't. It was a respectable business. And he's like, what was this business? And then she tells him the name. And then Jungwon tells her that company had been in the news because the former company boss, CEO, had died, tragically, or had been murdered, And so Kongshil's like, oh, I see. And then Jungwon makes this comment: you see ghosts, but don't you bother, watching and reading the news? And that came about because she had a newspaper in front of her, and her job was to read the day's newspapers or headlines to Jungwon, right? Now that Secretary Kim was, on leave for, sick leave. And so Kongshil leans in and she's like, I stopped listening and watching the news because news are supposed to be true, but I learned through ghosts that they're not. And then she tells him, the recent artist that won this international award, she's like, I thought it was awesome that, he was putting Korea on the map, but I then learned from his dead friend that he had actually taken the dead, or something, not that she had learned from the dead friend's ghost, but that she had learned from a ghost that the artist had stolen the paintings of his dead friend and was passing it off as his own, right? And so Jungwon, before she can even tell him who the famous artist is, though, Jungwon literally takes his finger and pushes her head away, right? And he says, I have a lot of work to do, right? Well, while this is going on, we learn that, so that's what she tells him, and then he says, read me the, newspaper. Well, we then learn from the VP, who has been apprised of the situation from his secretary, that Jungwon is now keeping Kongshil as his temporary secretary because Secretary Kim is home on sick leave. And then we also learn from the aunt who's talking with Iryong that Jungwon must hate his father the most. Because what happened was, I think the rumor around Kingdom is that Jungwon's dad refused to pay the ransom for getting, I think, Hiju safely home. And so Jungwon blames his father for Hiju's death. Well, anyway, so Kongshil is now officially, or for the day at least, Jungwon's secretary. And as she follows him up the escalator to a meeting, she wonders. She's like, oh, I forget that you are really the CEO of Kingdom and that you must have a lot of work. And he says, I have a lot of work. Of course, because I'm the CEO. Do you forget that? And then she said, well, whenever I see you, you're always just looking through that golden telescope. And she's like, what do you see through that, right? Well, anyway, then, Jungwon says, I'll show you how much important work that I do. Follow me. And then they walk into this big, huge conference room, right, where Jungwon is being debriefed. Well, Kongshil sits on one of the chairs on the wall, while Jungwon then sits at the head of the conference table, and it's like that, huge, impressive, U-shaped conference table, right? And as he's looking at the PowerPoint slides, of course, the letters, kind of jumble. So Chungwon kind of puts his head down and he just focuses on listening, right? And Kong Shi, before they had gone into the meeting, had said, had debriefed him, and she's like, "Do you need anything further? Do you need a further debriefing?" And Chungwon had said, "No, it's all up here, right?" He's like, because I can't read anymore, my mind has to be really sharp about retaining all the information." Which is just amazing, the compensation he's learned to do, right? But anyway, so she gets to see him at work, and as Chungwon is listening, Kongshi looks around and she notices that there's a ghost sitting on an empty chair, and it freaks her out. But she kind of inwardly draws herself inward because she doesn't want to make a scene and cause Chungwon embarrassment, right? Well, Chungwon sees her shifting in her chair and then turn away from something, right? So realizing then that a ghost has followed her again, he gets up from his seat, much to the surprise of everyone else in the room. He calmly walks over, puts his hand on her shoulder, and then at that point, the presenter kind of halts in his presentation, and Chungwon says, "Continue, I'm listening." And then he walks a little bit to and fro in the conference room while the meeting's going on. And as this happens, the VP takes everything in and he kind of files it away for future use to get, his advantage over Chungwon. Anyway, so as they're leaving, they're back in his office, and she tells him, "Thank you so much for your help there, because the ghost was really scary, right?" And she appreciates it, especially because he had said only Taegong-shi's zone and stuff, right? But anyway, so then before she leaves his office, though, she's like, "Can I see what's in your telescope?" And then she walks over and she starts peering at the telescope. And then that's where we get this kind of very, I guess, our first inkling of something more than just a, I guess, business relationship between these two, right? So she's looking through the telescope, and then he comes around, and then with her in front of him and his arms kind of around her, he directs her to all the various things that he looks at in the telescope, right? Like Giant Mall and the parking lot, who's going in, who's coming out, that kind of thing. And then you can definitely tell that Kongshi is affected by that a little bit, the proximity, or his proximity. And then so she kind of, pulls away a little bit. And then he tells her that she seems to be forgetting the fact that he is her boss often, right? That he has a lot of work and things like that, right? But he says, in addition to that, you also forget something else. Your emergency hideout or your safe haven, you forget that he's also a man, right? I'm not this concrete, because I guess she had referred to him as a concrete, slab of concrete at one point, right? And so she backtracks and she's like, "사장님, you're not concrete. You're like marble." And he's not thrilled to go from concrete to marble, right? Until she says, "Marble's really expensive and it's something that's cherished, right?" And so he's mildly mollified, right? And then as they're walking out of his office, because she had pointed to the wall paneling and how it's marble, he slaps his hand, effectively trapping her against the wall. And so Kongshi is kind of like gulping at this point. And he's like, "Do you see this marble? It's not just any marble." He's like, "It's the most expensive marble around. It's the best marble," right? Implying then that he's the best man out there, right? Well, anyway, as, they're talking, Kang-woo learns from Lee-ryung, and actually, he learns from, I think, Hanju, that Secretary Kim has left for the day because he's sick, and that Kong-sil is now going to be secretary, at least until Secretary Kim is back. And so Kang-woo looks at the camera, security camera, with, definitely a little bit of a growing jealous streak. During that time, though, Lee-ryung finds out about that as well, and she sees Kang-woo kind of watching them a little bit. And so she says, "Oh, are you spying on them, right?" And then Kangwoo says, "I'm not spying. I'm watching because I'm jealous." And so Lee Jung's like, "What the heck?" And then she makes this comment about because he says, "How come you're here so often, right?" He's like, "Don't you have anything to do?" And she's like, "Hey, I'm a top big, celebrity." And he's like, "Right, you are, I know." And then he makes this comment. He says to her, "You know, when I see you less, and then I see you as a celebrity, you're prettier." And then he walks away. And so Lee Young's left wondering, was that a compliment or was that a curse, right? Anyway, Kongshil and Jungwon end up walking towards the kids department, and you see Jungwon really happy, and so Kongshil looks at him and she says, "Oh, you must really like children." And Jungwon says, "It's not the children I love. It's the money that the children bring," right? And he's like, with one child, the wallets of mother, father, grandmother, grandfather, or aunt or uncle, those all open, right? And you see, him being very calculating in terms of money and stuff. Well, while this is going on, and then he mentions how Kongshi should buy a doll then, right? If he's like, "You too should open your wallet and buy a doll," and Kongshi kind of walks away saying, "I'm not going to spend my money here." Anyway, so as they're surveying the various boutiques and such, one of the shoppers, a little boy of one of the shoppers comes to the mom and says, "Mom, I think I lost my bag." And the mom, she doesn't even look down at him, and she's like, well, she does, but she says, "Then you better spend your time finding that bag." And then she sends her child, who's only like 5 or 6, on a hunt looking for that bag while she examines like all these designer handbags and such, right? Well, then, as the little boy is searching for the handbag, he comes across one of the little boy ghosts. And the little boy ghost then takes the boy to Kongshil's office, has the little boy open the office and then says, "You can have that doll. Take that doll and we'll be friends." And so the little neglected boy ends up taking that doll, and then he goes back to his mom, right? So the mom leaves with him clutching the little doll, and Kongshil happens to see the little boy leave with the doll, and she's like, "Oh, 사장님, that's the scary doll. That's the dangerous doll." And so she follows, but by then the mom and kid have disappeared. And so the next thing we see is her talking to Kangwoo, trying to find out the address of this person, right? And Kang was actually able to give her the address because the person is a member, I guess, of Kingdom Mall or something like that, right? And so she's like, "Thank you," and then she's about to leave for the office, and then Kang says, "I heard that you were secretary to the CEO today. Isn't he going to be upset if you leave in the middle of the day?" And then she's like, "Oh no, the boss understands the work that I have to do," which, Kangwoo takes it in a very different light, right? A little jealous, yes, right? So anyway, she then takes the address to Jungwon, and then she tells him, right? And then um, I can't remember if she wanted Jungwon to go with her or what have you, but anyway, um, this whole episode really centered around the whole social issue of child abuse and things like that, right? So later on that day, Kangwoo finds the bag and comes to show the bag to Kongshil, right? And Kongshil sees that on the bag is a little picture of the boy, and she's like, "Oh, I guess his name's Chanwoo." And she's like, "Yeah, this is the it's either Chanwoo or Changmin," but she says, "Oh, this is the kid's bag," and then Kangwoo offers to go with her to get the doll, right? And oh, I now remember. Kongshi, when she had taken the address to the 사장님 and said, to Jungwon and said, "Oh, this is the address and such," right? When she had tried to call, the mom had pretty abruptly said, "We don't have a doll here. My kid didn't take a doll, and we lost a bag instead. So why don't you focus on finding that bag?" And then she hangs up, right? And so Kongshi's like, she totally lied, and instead, um, just told me to find the bag, right? Because they clearly saw on the CCTV that, the kid had walked out with the doll. And so she had wanted Jungwon to kind of go with her, and Jungwon's like, I'm busy, right? Well, so when Kangwoo finds the bag, he offers to go with Kongshil after work to the house. And Kongshil, of course, is appreciative of that. And throughout this episode, there's always this kind of juxtaposition of Kangwoo, who's very sweet, like the lollipop that he gave her, and then, Jungwon's gruff, kind of, cold personality. And I don't know what it is. Is it that cold, the awesome cold thing? But you see Kongshil, of course, being more affected by Jungwon than Kangwoo, right? Well, as Kongshil starts to flip through the bag, she happens to notice this drawing, the sketchbook, right? And so whatever she sees in that sketchbook causes her enough alarm that she drops everything and goes to the kid's house immediately instead of waiting for Kangwoo, right? Well, in the meantime, Jungwon learns from his aunt, who is looking at buying some artwork as a piece of investment, that there are some paintings that have recently come up for sale from the celebrated artist, the Korean artist who had won that international honor, right? And so Jungwon can't remember if that was the artist, and he wonders, right? So when the aunt says, "Are you not going to buy it?" he says, he hesitates and he says, "Let me think about it a little bit more," right? And the next scene we see is him stomping over to Kongshil's office, and he yells, "Tae-Kongshil, I have a question for you." And then when he goes into the office, she's nowhere to be seen, because right before he barges into her office, you hear him saying to himself, "I'm not here to find out anything other than the name of the artist. It's not going to change my decision to buy, but I just want confirmation," right? And then he barges in, and then he notices that it's empty, and on her desk is the sketchbook. And as he flips through the sketchbook, we then see exactly what had caused Kongshil alarm, because the first page, I mean, all the sketches are dark. I mean, it's black background, and we see in the first page this kid crying, right? And then the second page, we then see this mom with an umbrella, right, about to hit the little boy. And as he's looking at that, we then see the mom clutching in real life an umbrella and then walking in to hit her child, right, for having lost his book. And at that point, the kid is crouching in the corner. And even though she's beating him, the camera obscures the view of the little boy so that it's not quite as graphic. But anyway, when we get to the third page, you then see Jungwon sees that the kid is locked in a closet, which then coincides with the timing of Kongshil going in. She kind of sneaks into the apartment, because as Kongshil arrives at the apartment complex, the mom, ever so serene, takes out the trash, right? And so she leaves the door ajar. Kongshil slips in. She goes into the kid's room, sees the doll, and then kind of says, "Hey, little ghost," and then the ghosts pop up, and she asks, "Where's the little kid?" right? And then they point to this closet that has been tied up, locked with this little rope, right? And then when she unravels the rope, it's to find the little boy, Chungmin, I think was his name, completely bruised, half unconscious, right? So without any consideration, without any concern for the fact that she's, trespassing someone, in someone else's house, and that she's attempting to take a kid out of the mom's possession, right? She sees the child abuse, and the child's safety is the first thing on her mind, as it should be. So she carries him out, and then as she carries him out, the mother comes back and she's like, "Who are you? What are you doing with my child?" And then Kongshil says, "Your child needs to go to the hospital." And as she tries to, push past the mom grabs the child from Kongshil's arms and then pushes Kongshil against the sofa. And then one of the wall hangings falls and kind of gives Kongshil like a little cut. wound, if you will. And then Kongshil, instead of backing down though, she sees how hurt the little boy is, and then she forces the mom against the wall. She kind of pushes the mom against the wall and grabs the little boy, carries him out, right? And as she's carrying him out, about to rush into the hospital, we see Jungwon arrive at the scene. And the look on his face as he sees her with the child, she just says, "Sajangnim." And then he just understands everything because he too saw the sketch, right? And I love the fact that despite everything, this episode, he really is fully getting sucked into her world. And, instead of calculating at this point, I can't get involved. I'm the CEO of Kingdom. My business can't afford any bad publicity or anything like that. Without any consideration for that, he says, "I'll take him to the hospital." And then he takes the child from Kongshil's arms, and then they go to the hospital, and then the little boy gets treatment there. Well, as once they, ascertain that the kid's okay, they're up at the hospital roof, and then Kongshil fills Jungwon in on what the little ghost had told her about the fact that each of them had been a child of neglect and abuse, and that when they had died alone, that for the most part, when they had died alone, the doll was the only thing that had comforted them, right? And then so Kongshil is holding the doll, and then she tearfully apologizes, saying, "I'm so sorry that you had to die alone, that no one was there to help you, that no one was there to comfort you or hug you," right? And then with that, because someone had acknowledged their deaths and their pain and their loneliness and neglect, each of the ghosts now are completely flesh colored, and then they smile, and then they disappear. Well, in the meantime, Kang-woo is, of course, surveying the mall, and he comes across this little vendor stall with all these like stuffed animals, and Tulli is one of the Korean cartoons that kids really love. It's like Bororo, right? But so he sees this pink Tulli doll. And he's like, "Oh, I didn't know Tulli came in pink." And then the vendor tells him, "Oh, it's not Tulli, it's Tulli's girlfriend." And he's like, "Oh." But then she says, "Yeah, it's Tulli's girlfriend, Kongshil." And then Kang was like, "Oh, Kongshil?" And so because of that, he then says, "Can give me one of each," right? So he goes to Kongshil's office, and he puts it there, and then he decides he's going to hide it in one of the desk drawers so that she can find it, right, as a surprise. So he opens one of the drawers, sees this manila envelope, thinks about opening it, but then tells himself no, because he really likes her and he doesn't want to do any snooping. And then he puts the Kongshil doll in there, and then he leaves, right? And then that's when we find out that at the hospital, Kongshil and Jungwon had been arrested by the police for kidnapping and all of the stuff, right? And so they go to the police station, and then Secretary Kim leaves hurriedly to deal with that situation. As he comes out of the office, he runs into the aunt and Lee-ryung, who had then at that point come to see if Jungwon had time to have lunch with them, right? So Secretary Kim goes to the hospital, and then he confronts the mother and tells her that the situation's been assessed by Kingdom's expert child psychologist, and she's actually been found guilty of child abuse and all of this stuff, right? And then she's like, "Who is this child psychologist? Why would you guys have that?" And then it's so cool. Secretary Kim pulls out his psychologist license, and you're thinking, you were a psychologist? Cool, right? And he pulls it out, and he's like, "It's me." And then he says, "And the Kingdom attorney has now filed suit to sue you for libel, child abuse, and all of this stuff, child endangerment, and also for harassing and attacking one of our employees and things like that, right?" And she's like, "Who is this attorney?" Right? And then he pulls out another badge, and he's like, "It's me." And it's so cool. And then the police take her away for child abuse, right? And then Secretary Kim tells the physician, "Make sure that you check everything, that the boy is all right, and then send the bill to Kingdom." Right? Well, Lee-ryung then sees Kangwoo and she tells him that Jungwon is in jail with Kongshil, and then she's like, "You want to go with me because I'm on my way there?" And Kangwoo just takes off without her, right? Well, they're in jail now, and it's so cute because Kongshil's here and Jungwon's here. They're in separate, like they have jail holding cells for like women and then men. They separate them, right? But Secretary Kim releases Chungwon, and then Kongshil's like, "사장님, what about me?" And then she's like, "Please don't leave. I didn't say it before because I knew that you were really mad, but there's a really scary looking ghost right next to me, right, an ajumma." And then so even though Chungwon doesn't really want to, deal with her right now, he stops by her and then he allows her to touch him, right, to dispel the ghost, right? So anyway, outside though, because of course Secretary Kim has arranged for Kongshil to be released as well. She then says thank you and all of this stuff, and that's when Jungwon notices that she has this cut on her forehead, and then he kind of does he cups her face to look at it, right? And then he gets all mad because she'd been hurt, right? Well, he then says let's go to the hospital immediately and get that taken care of. Kangwoo comes up just as they're leaving, and you have to wonder how much of that last scene he had seen where Jungwon had touched her face. Well, Lee-ryung sees that from her car too, and then she makes this comment, so Jungwon's here because of Kongshil, right? Well, Kangwoo's now sufficiently upset. He stalks back to Kingdom. He goes into Taegong's office, opens the drawer, takes out the pink, the Kongshil doll, and then as he does so, he notices the envelope again, and then this time he has no compunction about opening it, and then he looks at it and he's like, "Hiju?" And then he wonders what exactly Kongshil is doing with those pictures, right? And if she might at all be in any way related to that. Well, they're coming out from the hospital, and Jungwon is saying, we're done with the hospital and stuff like that, but I'm still hot, like, and the word he uses, it also implies that he's still steamed, kind of like inside he's kind of fuming. Although you can, Kongshil probably, mistook it for I'm really hot because of the weather, right? So then she says, "Oh, 사장님요, thank you." And she's like, "Well, do you want to use this?" And of course she has the couple fan from the furniture store just magically appears, right? And so she's like, "Oh, but then you didn't want to be a set with me, huh? You didn't want to be a couple. You didn't want to have the same couple fan with me, huh?" So she proceeds to put it back, and then he stops her and he takes it and he fans himself, right? And then he, I think, ends up holding her hand at some point, and whether it was to give her comfort or to ward off any ghosts and stuff, right? And then Kongshil looks at it and she's like, "사장님, that's not the Taegongshil zone, right? That's not the Taegongshil zone." And so then he says, you can, it's all right. You've already touched everything else. So, as a reward, I'm touching you as a reward, and then you can touch wherever you need to, right? And then she tells him, she says, "It's really weird. 이상하다, right?" And she says, "I see something on my radar." Oh, but I forgot to say, she just says it's weird, right? And then he holds her and he's like, "Look, I've come as, in the time I said I wasn't going to, but I've come as far as I can. So you can be by my side," which is very, leading, right? And then she says to him, "I'm catching something on my radar, something odd on my radar," right? And then he gives her his hand. He offers her his hand and he's like, "Use it then," right? And instead of taking his hand, she touches his cheek in much the same way that Hiju had touched his cheek. And then she says that, "사장님, when I touch you like this, you feel nothing, huh?" And then he takes her hand and then he puts it against his heart and he says, "I'm not the marble that you think I am," right? And he's like, "I'm not this marble hideout or refuge that you think I am." And then that's how the episode ends, on this very provocative statement. So anyway, I'm at 54 minutes. This is literally the equivalent of having watched the entire episode, huh? I am so sorry. I'm gonna quickly, bid you goodbye, close this out, save it, and hopefully upload it, and you'll be able to watch it sooner rather than later. So take care, everyone. I will see you tomorrow then for episode 8. Okay? 안녕, 친구들. Bye.